The quiet departure of the chamber hung suspended in the darkness between star systems. A monument to architectural ambition built by the Zarathi centuries before most species had discovered faster than light travel. Inside, representatives from 53 species occupied their designated spaces, their forms as varied as the cosmos itself. Some floated in containment fields, others stood on platforms, adjusted for their gravity preferences, and a few existed as patterns of energy, barely visible to organic eyes. Ambassador David Chun stood at the human platform, his posture relaxed, despite the tension crackling through the air. He wore the standard diplomatic uniform of Earth's coalition service, deep blue with silver accents, nothing elaborate or intense. His dark hair showed streaks of gray earned over 15 years of service, and his brown eyes remained steady as the vote tally materialized in the holographic display above the assembly floor. Species after species registered their decision. The Zarathi, ancient and crystalline, voted yes. The Korvax, massive and fur-covered, voted yes. The Thaleen, aquatic beings in mobile water tanks, voted yes. Even the Merrick, who had been humanity's closest allies for 2 decades, abstained, rather than vote no. The motion was clear and unambiguous. Humanity would be removed from the Galactic Coalition. All human personnel, facilities, operations, and assets must be withdrawn from Coalition space. Within 8 months, no exceptions would be granted. The final tally appeared in symbols that translated automatically for each species. 67% approval, more than the required majority. High Arbiter Zelkuin, a Zarathi whose crystalline form refracted light into dancing patterns, spoke with a voice like bells echoing in a cathedral. The motion passes. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Coalition is hereby revoked. All privileges, protections, and obligations are terminated, effective immediately. Withdrawal must be completed within the specified time frame. Chun nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. Around him, other ambassadors had prepared for various human reactions. The Korvax military attach had positioned security personnel, expecting anger. The Thaleen diplomat had prepared soothing statements, anticipating tears or pleas. The Merrick representative had written an apology speech, ready to explain their abstention. None of it proved necessary. Chun spoke clearly, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We understand and accept the Assembly's decision. Humanity will begin immediate withdrawal from all Coalition territories. We thank the Assembly for the 60 years of cooperation we have enjoyed and wish all species prosperity in the future. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect humanity had learned from the Merrick, then stepped back from his platform. No arguments, no appeals, no dramatic statements about injustice or betrayal. The silence that followed felt heavier than Chun's words. In the observation gallery, Kara, a young Merrick Jr. diplomat, felt her 4 hearts constrict. She had worked alongside humans for 5 years, had learned their languages, had shared meals prepared with careful attention to her dietary needs. She watched Chun's face through the transparent barrier and saw something that troubled her deeply. A look at sad, but not surprised. Not even particularly upset. Hust resigned, as if he had expected this outcome all along. The assembly dissolved into clusters of conversation, most representatives congratulating each other. Korvax Trade Minister Grath's deep voice rumbled with satisfaction. Finally, we can negotiate without human interference in every agreement. Their insistence on equitable terms was becoming insufferable. A Thalan military coordinator, Hinet al-Praxis, rippled in his containment tank, patterns of color expressing agreement, always inserting themselves into conflicts that did not concern them, always suggesting peaceful solutions when decisive action was required. Even former allies joined the chorus of relief. Marur Ambassador Tolkien, whose abstention had been a political calculation, spoke quietly to his aides. Humanity meant well, but they never understood they were too young, too idealistic. The galaxy operates on principles they refused to accept. Only a handful of representatives remained quiet. Kara noticed the Vryn observer, a species known for their analytical nature, taking extensive notes. The Vryn insectoid beings whose compound eyes saw in spectrums invisible to most species, rarely spoke in assembly but missed nothing. The celebration continued for hours. In adjoining chambers, diplomats discussed the new opportunities humanity's absence would create. Trade routes could be reorganized, military alliances could be development programs could be redirected. No one seemed to notice the small details that Chun had mentioned in his brief statement. He had said immediate withdrawal, not the full 8 months they had been granted. Immediate. The next morning, human freighters began arriving at outposts throughout Coalition space. On Korvax Prime, a trading hub world where humans had operated, a commercial exchange for 40 years. The shutdown began at dawn. Marcus Webb, the exchange director, supervised the orderly packing of equipment and transfer of accounts. His staff of 30 humans worked with quiet efficiency, scanning records, securing data, preparing everything for transfer to Korvax management. A Korvax clerk named Dreth approached Webb nervously. "Director Webb, what about the pending trade? Agreements with the Outer Rim colonies. You are mediating between 5 different species. Those negotiations have taken months." Webb looked up from his datapad, his weathered face showing genuine regret. "I've compiled all the negotiation records and proposals. Everything is in the system. The parties will need to continue without us. But you understand all their positions? You know what compromises might work. We do not have your experience with multi-species trade dynamics." "I'm sorry, Dreth." Webb's voice was kind, but firm. "The Assembly has decided humanity's participation is unwelcome. We have to respect that decision." Similar conversations repeated across thousands of worlds. On the medical station orbiting Thelene, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo packed her research on cross-species immune responses. A Thelene doctor named Vresh watched in distress as decades of collaborative work was reduced to data files. "Dr. Okonkwo, who will continue the mutation tracking project. We have only begun to understand how the Wraithen virus adapts across species." Various Okonkwo sealed another container, her movements precise despite the emotion in her eyes. "All my research notes are in the database. Fresh, you're brilliant. You'll figure it out. Your notes are incomplete. You always said the most important insights came from observing patients directly, from understanding their individual responses. That knowledge cannot be written down," Okonkwo said. One hand on the container. "You're right. I wish I could stay and teach you everything I've learned. But I can't. I'm sorry." In the disputed territories, a region where the Korvax and Zerath had contested boundaries for 3 centuries, Commander James O'Coofer oversaw the dismantling of the human peacekeeping station. The station had maintained stability for 35 years, its presence a neutral ground where both species could meet without losing face. Korvax General Marath and Zerathi, Coordinator Linus both attended the final day of operations. Marath's massive form, covered in silver-gray fur, dominated one side of Okafor's office. Linus's crystalline structure refracted the room's light into rainbow patterns. "The border will remain stable," Marath insisted, his voice a low growl. "We have no desire for conflict." "Does Zerathi concur?" Linus chimed. "We have maintained peace for 35 years. We do not need human oversight to continue." Okafor nodded, though his eyes held doubt he did not voice. "The peace has lasted 35 years, since the day this station opened and humanity began mediating your disputes. Before that, you fought for 3 centuries. "That was the past," Marath said dismissively. "We have evolved beyond such primitive behavior." Okafor did not argue. He simply shook their hands, or the equivalent gesture for their species, and left. Behind him, Korvax and Zerathi officers eyed each other across the table, old suspicions already stirring in the absence of a neutral presence. Throughout Coalition space, the pattern repeated with eerie consistency. Humans departed with grace, leaving behind detailed records, careful instructions, and sincere apologies for their sudden absence. They did not sabotage anything. They did not take revenge. They did not even complain. Asterisk. Kara, the young Marek diplomat, found herself obsessively watching the withdrawal. She accessed public records and was shocked by what she discovered. Humans had been involved in far more activities than she had realized. They ran medical clinics on 17 worlds. They operated schools teaching coalition languages to developing species on 32 planets. They maintained trade coordination offices in 41 systems. They served as mediators in disputes ranging from planetary boundaries to commercial disagreements. She brought her findings to Ambassador Telkin. "Sir, did you know humans were operating a teacher training program on Merrick colony worlds? They were preparing our educators to work with mixed-species student populations." Telkin's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of dismissal. That was never formally approved. They took it upon themselves to expand beyond their mandate. But the teachers say the programs were valuable. Hundreds of Merrick educators received training that our own institutions did not provide. Then our institutions will need to develop such training themselves. We cannot rely on another species to educate our people. Kara wanted to argue, but recognized the futility. Instead, she returned to her research, compiling a private record of human activities. The scope astounded her. Humans had integrated themselves into the fabric of coalition society so thoroughly that their removal would leave thousands of small gaps. Most species did not notice those gaps, yet the celebration continued. On Earth and humanity's colony worlds, the returning personnel were greeted with mixed emotions. Some felt bitter about the rejection. Others felt relieved to be home. Most felt a deep sadness about leaving behind work they considered meaningful. Ambassador Chun gave a final address to the diplomatic corps, broadcast to all human worlds. "We were not expelled because we did anything wrong. We were expelled because we did things to right, too often, in ways that made others uncomfortable. We showed that youth does not mean inability. We demonstrated that idealism can produce results. We proved that caring about others is not weakness." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "Now we must accept that not everyone wants help, even when they need it. We must respect the coalition's decision while staying true to who we are. We will not become cynical. We will not become isolated. We will simply redirect our efforts to those who welcome them." The withdrawal completed in 4 months, half the allotted time. The last human vessel, a diplomatic ship named the Bridge Builder, crossed the border of coalition space on schedule. Chun stood at the observation window, watching the stars of coalition space recede behind them. His aide, a young woman named Lieutenant Amara Husei, stood beside him. "Sir, do you think they will realize what they have lost?" Chun was quiet for a long moment. "Eventually. The question is whether they will admit it when they do." Behind them, in coalition space, the first cracks were already appearing. A trade dispute escalated when no one could find the human coordinator who had been managing negotiations. A medical emergency worsened when doctors realized the treatment protocols assumed human consultation. A border patrol discovered that pirates had increased activity on routes humanity used to monitor. Small problems, Izoli dismissed as coincidences. But they were not coincidences. They were symptoms of a vast network of support suddenly removed. The galaxy had grown accustomed to human presence without understanding its importance. They had mistaken service for interference, help for intrusion, and quietly competent work for invisibility. In the assembly chamber, now empty of celebration, the Vryn observer completed his analysis. He had calculated the economic impact of human withdrawal, the security implications, the social disruptions. The numbers troubled him deeply. He sent his report to the High Arbiter with a simple note. "We may have made a catastrophic error in judgment. I recommend immediate monitoring of all systems where humans operated. I predict significant destabilization within 6 months." The report was filed and forgotten. After all, the Vryn were known for pessimism. Surely the elder species of the galaxy could manage without a species. Barely a century into space travel. Surely they would be fine. The silence left by humanity's departure was absolute, but silence, as the galaxy would soon learn, can be the loudest sound of all. Asterisk. The deafening silence 6 months after humanity's departure. The Galactic Coalition convened an emergency session. The chamber that had celebrated humanity's expulsion, now filled with tension thick enough to taste across species barriers. High Arbiter, Zelkon's crystalline form, pulsed with agitated light patterns, a sign of stress rarely displayed by the normally composed Zarathi. The situation reports scrolled across holographic displays, each one worse than the last. 17 active conflicts, 43 trade route disruptions, medical emergencies on 11 worlds, economic instability affecting 32 systems, infrastructure failures across countless installations. Korvac's Trade Minister Grath stood at his platform, his silver fur matted and unkempt, a shocking departure from his usual immaculate appearance. We are facing complete collapse of the Outer Rim trade network. Prices have increased by 300% on essential goods. Minor species are unable to afford basic supplies. We have reports of potential famines on 6 developing worlds.
How
is this possible? Zelkon's voice chimed with confusion. The trade routes existed long before humanity arrived. A Vryn analyst named Tikra, whose compound eyes reflected data streams invisible to others, stepped forward. His insectoid form clicked softly as he moved. With respect, High Arbiter, the routes existed, but humanity optimized them. My investigation shows that humans operated what they called redundancy networks. They connected markets that major trading houses considered unprofitable. They transported goods deemed too insignificant for large vessels. They provided backup options when primary routes experienced disruptions. We have our own trade vessels, Grath protested weakly. Yes, but our vessels follow predictable patterns and service only profitable routes. Tekresh displayed a 3-dimensional map of trade networks. The thick lines represent major coalition routes. The thin golden threads represent human operations. Watch what happens when I remove the human presence. The golden threads vanished. The map fragmented immediately, with dozens of systems suddenly isolated. Connection points disappearing, and entire regions cut off from regular supply chains. They were not the main routes, Tekresh continued, but they were the connections that held everything together. Without them, the network lacks resilience. Any disruption cascades into system-wide failure. The chamber absorbed this information in uncomfortable silence. General Praxis, the Thaleen military coordinator, rippled in his containment tank, colors shifting to indicate distress. The security situation is equally dire. Pirate activity has increased by 400%. The disputed territories between Korvax and Zarathi space have erupted into open warfare. 17 border regions are experiencing armed conflicts that had been dormant for decades. Surely our forces can handle pirates, Zelkun said, though his tone suggested doubt. Our forces patrol major shipping lanes and strategic positions. Praxis projected tactical maps showing patrol patterns. Humans also patrolled secondary routes, tertiary systems, and remote outposts. They varied their schedules unpredictably. Their presence discouraged piracy simply by being everywhere. We cannot replicate that coverage without tripling our fleet size. Then triple the fleet size. High Arbiter, our naval budget would need to increase by 700% to match human patrol patterns. We do not have those resources. A Thelian medical director named Sorith entered the discussion, her aquatic form moving agitatedly in her mobile tank. The medical situation is catastrophic. The Wraithen virus mutation has spread to 9 species. Mortality rates are 5 times higher than projections. We are losing thousands of lives daily. We have competent medical personnel, Zelkun insisted, his crystalline structure now pulsing erratically. Asterisk. We do, Soreth agreed. But we are discovering that human doctors approached medicine differently than we do. We focus on identifying diseases and applying established treatments according to species biology. Humans focused on individual patients. adapting treatments based on unique circumstances, emotional states, and complex interactions between biology and environment. That sounds unscientific. It was extraordinarily effective. Sorith displayed medical outcome data. Human-involved treatment centers had mortality rates 40% lower than our facilities. We attributed this to superior equipment. Now we realize it was their methodology. They saw patterns we missed. Because they looked at factors we dismissed as irrelevant. Kara, who had been granted observer status due to her research on human activities, requested permission to speak. Zelkun granted it reluctantly. The young Marek diplomat stepped forward, her forearms holding data tablets that she had spent months compiling. High Arbiter, honored representatives, I have documented over 12,000 distinct human activities across Coalition space. She projected her findings: medical clinics, educational programs, infrastructure maintenance, dispute mediation, agricultural consultation, technical training, cultural exchange programs, and hundreds of other initiatives. Most of these were never officially approved, a Korvax counselor objected. No, Kara agreed. Humans often operated informally, filling needs without seeking recognition or authorization. They saw problems and solved them. They encountered suffering and eased it. They found ignorance and taught. They discovered conflict and mediated. She highlighted specific examples. On Marek colony worlds, humans trained 3,000 teachers in multi-species education techniques. On Korvax mining stations, human engineers improved safety systems that have since failed, resulting in 43 deaths in the past month. In the Zerathi agricultural zones, human consultants optimized crop yields that have now dropped by 30% in disputed territories throughout Coalition space. Human mediators maintained stability in regions that are now experiencing renewed violence. The data was overwhelming. Species after species had relied on human expertise without realizing Italiano. The humans had worked so quietly, so efficiently, that their contributions had become invisible. They had been the connective tissue of Coalition society, and their removal had left the body politic hemorrhaging from thousands of small wounds. Ambassador Telkin, Kara Superior, finally spoke. He had lost weight in recent months, his usually vibrant coloring dulled by stress. I abstained from the expulsion vote because I believed it was politically necessary. His voice carried shame. I told myself that humanity's idealism was naive, that they did not understand how galactic politics truly operated. I was wrong. They understood perfectly. They simply chose to operate by different principles. He gestured to Kara's data. They chose service over recognition. They chose effectiveness over glory. They chose to help because it was right, not because it advanced their position. And we expelled them because their competence made us uncomfortable. That is absurd, Grath protested. We expelled them because they interfered. No, Tekresh. The Vryn stepped forward again. We expelled them because they made us look incompetent. B. Comparison. They were a young species, barely a century in space, achieving results that elder species with millennia of experience could not match. This wounded our pride. The expulsion was not about human behavior. It was about our own insecurity. The chamber erupted in protests, but Zelkun called for silence, his chiming voice cutting through the noise. The Vryn speaks harsh truth, but truth nonetheless. We must address the current crisis. What solutions do we have? A Korvax military strategist named Velkor proposed immediate mobilization. We increase security forces, expand patrol coverage, and take direct control of trade coordination. We demonstrate that the Coalition can function without humanity. Tech immediately displayed cost projections. Your proposal would require resources equivalent to 30% of total Coalition GDP for the next 5 years. Even 10. We would only partially replicate human effectiveness because we lack their methodology and approach. Then what do you suggest? Velkor demanded. Tekresh's compound eyes reflected the data streams he processed constantly. We contact humanity and requests they return. The silence that followed was absolute. Impossible, Grath finally said. We voted to expel them. We cannot simply reverse that decision. The coalition would appear weak, indecisive. We already appear weak, Soreth countered. 9 species are experiencing medical crises. 17 regions are at war. Trade networks are collapsing. How much weaker can we look? She has a point, Kara added quietly. My research shows that minor species throughout Coalition space are questioning our leadership. They remember that humans helped them directly while Coalition resources went to elder species. They're asking why we expelled the species that cared most about their welfare. Zelkins. Crystallian form dimmed, a sign of deep contemplation. If we were to contact humanity, what would we say? We expelled them. We told them they were unwelcome. Why would they return? Because they're human, Telkin said softly. In all my years working with them, I learned one fundamental truth about humanity. They help because it is their nature, not because it benefits them. If we ask them to return, if we admit we need the help, they will come back. Not because they want to gloat or demand concessions, but because people are suffering, and they cannot stand by while others hurt. You sound certain, Zelkin observed. I am. Telkin displayed a personal message he had received from Ambassador Chun 3 days earlier. Chun had sent it privately, not through official channels. It was brief. Ambassador Telkin, I hope you and your family are well. I have been following the news from Coalition space with concern. If the Coalition ever wishes to discuss renewed cooperation, humanity remains open to dialogue. We harbor no ill will. We simply want to help. With respect, David Chun. The message circulated through the chamber. Its tone was gentle, concerned, completely free of bitterness or triumph. They already know we are struggling, Praxis observed. Yet the message offers help, not mockery. Because that is who they are, Telkin said. We judged them as we would judge ourselves. We assumed their helpfulness masked ulterior motives, that their service was a strategy for gaining power. We could not conceive that they simply wanted to help because they valued helping. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Coalition needed humanity. Pride could not feed starving populations. Prestige could not. Cure plagues. Ancient wisdom could not stop wars that human mediators had previously prevented. Finally, Zelkin called for a vote. T-motion. T-motion. Dispatch a diplomatic delegation to human space to explore possibilities for renewed cooperation. The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, a Coalition vessel crossed into human territory. The delegation consisted of representatives from 7 species, led by Ambassador Telkin. They approached human space with trepidation, unsure what they would find. Asterisk. What they discovered shocked them completely. Human space was thriving. New stations under construction everywhere. Expanded mining operations in previously unexplored systems. Trade traffic moving in organized, efficient patterns. Everything looked prosperous, busy, and purposeful. They are not suffering at all, Grath observed with surprise. Why would they be? Tukresh responded. They took their competence with them when they left. The question was never whether humans could survive. Waitos, os. It was whether we could survive without them. The delegation requested permission to meet with human leadership and was directed to a diplomatic facility called Unity Station. It was newly built, elegant, but not ostentatious, designed to accommodate multiple species comfortably. Ambassador Chun met them in a conference room with panoramic windows, showing the construction of a new habitat ring. He looked exactly as he had 6 months ago, calm, professional, and genuinely pleased to see them. Welcome to Unity Station, he sighed warmly, gesturing for them to sit in furniture adjusted for their various forms. I am honored by your visit, though I confess some surprise. Telkin, leading the delegation, began with carefully prepared diplomatic language. But Chun raised a hand, gently. Ambassador Telkin. We have known each other for 15 years. Let us speak plainly. You are here because Coalition Space is experiencing difficulties after our departure. You want to know if humanity would consider returning? Is that accurate? The directness caught the delegation off guard. Telkin's forearms gestured in acknowledgement. Yes, Ambassador Chun. That is precisely why we are here. Chun folded his hands on the table. Then let me save us all some time. Humanity is willing to return to Coalition Space and resume our activities there. We never wanted to leave. We care about the people we were helping, and we have been deeply troubled by reports of suffering in our absence. Relief washed through the delegation. Grath leaned forward eagerly. Then you'll come back immediately. Chun's expression became more serious. We will come back, but not under the previous conditions. We will not return to being tolerated while doing work that others consider beneath them. We will not hide our contributions so that elder species can pretend they are managing everything themselves. What are you asking for? Soreth inquired. Respect, Chun said simply. Recognition that our contributions have value. A voice in decisions that affect the work we do. Equal treatment as a coalition member, not as junior partners, who should be grateful for acceptance. He pulled up a holographic display showing human activities outside Coalition Space. Since our departure, we have been contacted by 73 species, asking for our help. Species that you dismissed as too primitive or too minor to matter. We are helping them now, and they appreciate it. They treat us as equals, as partners, as friends. The display showed thriving human operations across dozens of systems, teaching programs, medical facilities, infrastructure projects, all conducted with species that had never been coalition members. We have more work than we can handle, Chun continued. We are building relationships, making real differences in people's lives, and being thanked for it. We do not need the coalition, but the coalition, I think, needs us. The words hung in the air, not spoken with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Tekresh stepped forward. Ambassador Chun, what specifically would humanity require to return? Chun displayed a list. First, formal recognition of human contributions and an acknowledgement that the expulsion was unjust. Second, equal voting rights in coalition decisions, with no restrictions based on how long a species has been a member. Third, permission to continue working with developing species without coalition interference. Fourth, establishment of joint human coalition programs that recognize our methodologies have value. Fifth, a commitment to evaluate policies based on effectiveness, not tradition. The delegation members looked at each other. These were not unreasonable demands, but they would require the coalition to admit error publicly and accept humanity as true equals. You are asking us to change how the coalition operates, Grath said slowly. I'm asking you to let the coalition evolve, Chun corrected. You built something impressive, but it has stagnated. You have ancient wisdom, but you have stopped learning. You have achieved much, but you have become comfortable. Humanity can bring new energy, new ideas, new approaches, but only if you truly welcome us, not just tolerate us. Telkin spoke quietly. Ambassador Chun, speaking personally, I believe humanity deserves everything you have asked for. You have earned it through your actions. But I cannot promise the coalition will agree. Chun nodded. I understand. That is why I am not asking you to promise anything now. Go back to the coalition. Present our conditions. Let them decide if their pride is more valuable than their people's welfare. We will wait for their answer. And if they refuse, Soreth asked, then we will continue our work outside Coalition Space. There is no shortage of people who need help, and we have learned that we do not need official recognition to make a difference. The delegation departed hours later, carrying Chun's terms back to Coalition Space. As their ship crossed the border, Telkin looked back at the thriving human stations. They do not need us at all, he said quietly to Kara, who had accompanied the delegation. We need them desperately, but they are perfectly content without us. Kara's forearms gestured in agreement. Perhaps that is why they can afford to be generous. They are negotiating from strength, but not demanding surrender. They want partnership, not dominance. Do you think the coalition will accept their terms? Kara considered the question. If they are wise, yes. If they are proud, no. We will discover which impulse is stronger. Behind them, in human space, Chun stood at the observation window, watching the coalition vessel depart. Lieutenant Asay joined him. Do you think they will agree to our terms, sir? Chun smiled slightly. Eventually, they will debate. They will argue about pride and precedent. They will look for compromises that let them save face. But in the end, they will agree because the alternative is watching their civilization crumble. The question is how much suffering happens before they make that choice. And if they take too long, then more people suffer unnecessarily, and humanity's relationship with the coalition is damaged perhaps permanently. We can only hope they choose wisdom over pride. The stars shone steadily in the darkness, indifferent to the political dramas of the species that had learned to travel between them. But among those stars, in countless systems across the galaxy, people waited to see if those who claimed to lead would remember that leadership meant service, not just authority. The silence, left by humanity's absence, had spoken volumes. The question now was whether anyone had truly listened. Asterisk.